The first time I saw Anansi, he was dangling from a single thread, right above my head. His many legs moved swiftly, weaving patterns in the air. I didn't know it then, but that little spider was about to turn the world upside down. It was the season of the dry winds when my village first heard of Anansi's plan. My name is Kofi, and I was just a boy then, barely old enough to carry water from the river. I had heard tales of the spider before, how he was both clever and dangerous, how he used tricks to get what he wanted. But I never imagined he would take the stories from the world. You see, back then, all the stories of the earth were kept by Nyam, the sky god. He kept them hidden, far above in the heavens, and no man or creature had ever been able to reach them. We only knew bits and pieces of those stories, fragments of the past, like the whisper of the wind. But they weren't ours. Not yet. One day, word spread through our village like wildfire. Anansi wanted the stories. The elders laughed at the thought. A mere spider, they said, challenging the mighty sky god. He's a fool. But Anansi was not foolish. He was determined. He went to Nyam, high in the sky, and asked for the stories. Give them to me, he said boldly, with his small body wrapped in webs. The sky god, amused by Anansi's nerve, laughed at him. You, a little spider, want the stories of the world. They are worth more than gold, more than life itself. But if you want them, there is a price. My father, who had seen more of the world than anyone in our village, told us what happened next. Nyam set Anansi 4 impossible tasks, thinking that would be the end of it. First, he had to capture the great python, Onini, whose size was so great that he could crush a man without even trying. Next, he had to bring the wild leopard, Osibo, a fierce hunter no one had ever caught. Then, the sky god demanded Maboro, the hornets, angry and dangerous, whose sting could kill. Finally, he had to bring him the invisible fairy, Moesha, who was said to be as swift as the wind and impossible to trap. Everyone in our village believed Anansi would fail. How could a tiny spider hope to capture creatures so powerful? But Anansi was clever, cleverer than anyone had imagined. The first task was python. Anansi went deep into the forest where Onini lived. I can still hear the stories told by the elders around the fire, how Anansi tricked the great snake. He played on Onini's pride, telling him that others had said the snake was not as long as a palm tree. Onini, insulted, stretched himself out straight. Anansi quickly wrapped him with his webs, tying him tight. Python struggled, but Anansi had won. Next, the leopard. Anansi dug a deep hole and covered it with leaves. When Osibo came prowling through the forest that night, he fell into the pit. Anansi lowered himself down, tied the leopard with his webs, and brought him to Nyam. But the hornets were harder. Maboro swarmed the forest, attacking anyone who came near. Anansi, however, filled a gourd with water, sprinkled it on himself, and stood under a banana leaf as though it were raining. Quick, he shouted to the hornets. The rain will drown you. Fly into my gourd, and I will keep you safe. Maboro, not knowing they had been tricked, flew into the gourd. Anansi sealed it tight. Last was the fairy, Moesha, the trickiest of them all. But Anansi was patient. He made a sticky doll from resin and covered it in white cloth. Then, he placed it where Moesha was known to play. When the fairy came, Anansi had her tied without even lifting a finger. She slapped the doll in frustration, and her hand stuck fast. By the time she realized what had happened, Anansi had captured her too. When Anansi brought all 4 creatures to Niam, even the sky god had to admit defeat. He could not believe that a tiny spider had completed the impossible tasks. As a reward, Niam released the stories of the world into Anansi's hands. That night, for the first time, we gathered in the village square, and the stories began to flow like water from a spring. We heard tales of creation, of the animals, of our ancestors, stories we had never known before. Anansi had given us the greatest gift, though he had taken it through trickery. The stories no longer belonged to the gods, they were ours now. As I grew older, I began to see the truth in Anansi's actions. He was not just a trickster for the sake of mischief. He had taken the stories from the sky god because they belonged to the people, not locked away in the heavens. Anansi showed us that with wit, even the smallest among us could change the world. And so, every time we sit under the stars and tell the tales of our past, we remember Anansi, the spider, who stole the stories and made them ours forever.